Good afternoon and welcome to episode 2. We made it that far. Isn't that special? Welcome on this gloriously sunny and warm day to Chateau Del Nick and the Boudoir Del Brown as we come together to discuss spiritual matters related to the past week news items in this 24-hour news cycle world where everything happens on social media about 10 minutes before everyone else gets told. All I can say is my usual phrase of what a week it's been is a grossly massive understatement. So welcome one and all. Thank you for coming. Hi, Facebook user. And hello, Cass. How you doing? And welcome to everyone else watching either now, live, or in the future. So it has been rather a hectic week for news and the matters relating to spiritual thoughts that it might imply. So let's get straight on by welcoming our regular panelist. I can say that now because he's been in every single one. Our regular panelist for the weekly review of the news from a spiritual view. And hello to Nicola. Let's give him a big internet round of applause because we're not technically just Little Port at the moment. Reverend Tony Swindells, are you there?
I'm here, dear. I'm here.
What a graceful tilt of the head that was as you came on. So how have you been, dear?
I've been very well, thank you. It's been a really good week, except for the news, as we're going to be discussing in a little while. But no, and this weekend we went to Sparkle in Manchester.
Wonderful.
Which Sparkle is Trans Pride Manchester, but they've just not rebranded because Sparkle was an event that happened before.
Yeah.
Fabulous weekend, fabulous,
Yes.
And the weather. Don't get me started on the weather. It's beautiful out
there. Certainly is a gorgeous day, and even the Reverend's in his summer uniform. bit of a hairy knee there, not very hairy, but there you go. That's what being blonde is all about. Well, friends, today, of course, we have our usual set topics to discuss, and what a week it's been.
Yeah.
We've all been feeling the heat, whether it's to do with lies or guns, is the byline for today. And you know, I was hoping that there would be some lightness to what it is that we are doing, but the universe wants us to obviously discuss the tough topics, and you know, that's what we're here for. Now, I will say right from the get-go, we are going to discuss matters that will have political information involved, but that is not our job. We are not here to discuss the ins and outs of politics per se, other than the spiritual and emotional impact that those particular topics have on us as individuals, on our congregation as ministers, and on spiritualists and other religious folk throughout the world, and even non-religious folk. So, you know, just so everyone understands that that's not what we're here to do. We're not here to say who was right and who was wrong. We're just to discuss the themes. And yes, we might slip an opinion in here and there, but it's not anything that we particularly endeavor to do. But hey, we're taxpayers. We have an opinion too. And you know, this is the thing. But of course, we're going to begin with something I would say a little bit lighter, but it certainly is still a hot topic: the weather.
Yes.
And just to kick things off with a little bit of amusement and positivity, here's some advice and guidance on how to cope with the hot weather from someone on TikTok.
When you try ice cream for the first time.
Legally, let go. Let go.
So we all feel like doing that, I'm sure, and there's probably some that have. But Tony, the heat, we're feeling it.
We are. It's getting really hot out there, which could take you down another rabbit hole, which isn't what we're talking about today. You know, climate change, etc., etc. But yeah, it's very hot. very hot.
It is. And to be fair, I think climate change is a topic that we would be allowed to broach because there's no one political standpoint on it other than the fact that some believe that it's a thing, some don't. Well, and whether you believe it or not, the world is changing. And, you know, once again, going back to last week, personal responsibility. Are we as a human race responsible for the change in climate, or is it this wondrously great circle that went all around in one go and constantly happens, and Mother Earth just likes to have her shirks every now and again and say, you know what, Mother Earth is having a hot flush, you know? Thoughts?
I would say, like you can't deny there is something going on, and the weather is changing, the planet is changing. We were driving over to Manchester yesterday, and as you're driving over through Derbyshire and onto the Pennines, you pass. You shoved an ice cream in your face once, Nick. You pass a run of 3 reservoirs, Derwent, and they are the lowest I have ever seen them in the 26 years I've been in Yorkshire and travelling over to Manchester. They are the lowest I've ever seen them, frighteningly low. So there is definitely something going on. I know if you look at some of the scientists, they say, yes, it's a cyclical thing, and, you know, it happens every so many millennia. But we've also got to acknowledge that it's not just about the weather per se, it's about the microplastics that we're finding in fish, in cattle and things, and all the tons and tons and tons and tons of rubbish that we've piled into landfills and then covered over and hoped that it would just go away.
Yeah. And in actual fact, you know, you remind me, and hello to Linda, Alan, Trace, and Sharon, by the way. You've reminded me, whenever I used to go out anywhere, my mum and dad always used to tell me that the advice of the time was always leave a place as you found it, which is brilliant, absolutely right. Recently, you know, as it's the summer months and we're getting ready to go on holiday, we go on YouTube and watch YouTube content creators who get ready for who go around traveling and talk about the locations we might be considering going to. And there's this American couple that we've been watching recently, and she said something of the same vein, but very, very different and very appropriate for the modern era, which is always leave a place better than you find it. And it's wonderful advice, but horrific that we should actually have to say that. You know, yes, go do your stuff, take your rubbish away, but grab a few more bits of rubbish as well, just to make it gradually better and better and better. And it's like, we shouldn't have to, but it's good that we do. But we shouldn't have to be in that situation where we're constantly having to take it. And I can see your signal's a bit dodgy, Reverend Tony. So chip in when you can, and I'll just keep gobbing on until you can get your voice in without sounding like a Dalek. Maybe it's the climate change that's affecting the signal. Bless you. But if you come back just shouting, there you are. Oh, still Daleki, dear. Tell Michael to turn the internet off.
I will. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back.
Or not?
You're back.
I'm back. There's a sign as you go onto the beach from our caravan which says, take nothing off the beach but litter and leave nothing on the beach but footprints.
Fabulous. And these are absolutely, and it's wonderful words, but
Why
I
do you need
can't
to
help
say
thinking why we would need to say exactly. We've created this mess, you know. The heat obviously comes with the sun, and the sun, UV rays, and you know the risks that are involved in. I mean, it's only about a month and a half ago I got myself heat stroke driving home from Peterborough one day before a church service. I was ill for days. And that was in a car with aircon. But we're also talking about other, even worse medical conditions that become, for instance, skin cancers. And, you know, obviously now I'm a free agent again. I've been getting back into the routines of what I used to do before I had no time at all. And Cats Does Countdown was always a late night favourite for me. And I'm reminded that one of the panelists, Sean, who was a really great comedian, he passed with cancer, and he was a builder who used to, before he was a famous comedian, he was a builder, and he got skin cancer from working with his shirt off and not wearing protection. Now, the thing is, for me, as soon as I mention anything like that, the instant response of those that just want to be argumentative will throw in, yes, well, if there's such a God, if there's such a thing as God, then why did he invent cancer? Your thoughts before I share mine.
This is something I've actually discussed with people, and what I said in my head, the way I picture it is, God had this thought: I'm going to create this planet, I'm going to populate it with people in my image, and there, it's your planet now, off you go. As a parent, you don't interfere, you just let people make their mistakes and things. And as far as things like cancer and other diseases, it's your own body attacking itself. It's not God. God didn't create cancer. And somebody really wise and wonderful once told me God isn't in the illness, it's in our response to the illness.
Yes,
And it's
absolutely.
people who support you while you, like Macmillan and your family, your loved ones, that's the humanity, that's the God, that's the, if you look at human in God's image, humanity, it's God's response. It's God coming through those people to help you and support you. And yeah,
absolutely. And I will add to that. Once again, I've discussed this with my friends upstairs, because we were talking before we come online. We discuss more subjects, you know, than we'd ever get through.
Yeah.
And we were talking about a certain comedian who has a lot to say about religion. And we were talking about, you know, various different things. And the science, spiritualism has often been described as a religion, a way of life, and a science. And the science side of it, if you actually look at science, what is the condition of cancer? It is a genetically mutated process of the body. It's where the cell keeps multiplying and multiplying and multiplying too much, that it causes problems. And it's the illnesses that follow that. It's the illnesses that mess up in the process causes the illnesses that causes the fatality and the suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a process in the body that's gone wrong because it's genetically tweaked and it's gone skew-iff. Mm-hmm. So something that we were actually given that was supposed to help us and heal us has been genetically altered by the conditions of the world that we are living in. So, you know, I'm perfectly honest. I've never lied to anyone. I have my vices. I'm a smoker, as you can tell by the smoker's cough. If I were to get lung cancer, I couldn't blame God, because it's been me that's been pumping this stuff in that's caused permanent changes to my genetic makeup that's turned this healing device into something that does completely the opposite.
Yeah.
And, you know, that on that side of it, it is my choice. I am working on it, and I'm smoking a lot less now that I'm a free agent. I will say that much. But you've got to look at what we've done to the world in the last 200-300 years since we've industrialized and revolutionized and started being all wonderful and better. You know, we've been pumping gases, we've been pumping smoke, we've been pumping soot into the atmosphere. We're suffering for it. The earth evidently is suffering for it. When we had the pandemic, you saw how much the atmosphere cleaned up when everyone was shut down in just a few days. And it was much the same process as what they tell you about when you're a smoker. You'll notice the biggest difference in the first few days, and then it will gradually become more permanent and permanent and permanent. So, you know, that's my answer when everyone blames God for cancer. No, once again, God didn't do it. We did it to ourselves. And that is, you have to be, I believe you have to be careful with that phrase, because it's a collective we throughout history. You and I didn't decide that we're going to poison the atmosphere. Joe Bloggs down the road didn't decide it. And the children that are coming in the next generation and the ones that are just with us, they didn't decide to do that. But we as a race collectively made the decision, oh, won't our life be better if we did this?
Yeah.
Sometimes choices go skew-iffy.
And sometimes choices come with consequences.
Absolutely. And do you know what? That's for the last week or so, that's been your favourite phrase, consequence. And, you know, it's so true, though. It is so true.
It is. It is. And that sort of can bring us on to the topics we were going to be discussing today anyway. No. We sort of went down a rabbit hole.
Yes, we did. That's another one of your phrases at the moment as well. So, yes, guns. In a week where, let's see, America experienced its 309th mass shooting this year. On the 4th of July, of course, as everyone in America was gathering for barbecues, parades, and fireworks. Chicago, Highland Park, 7 people were killed and 47 others injured. Now, we've also had today another shooting that wasn't in America, and of course, one of the most well-reported ones, Shinzo Abe, the former Prime Minister of Japan, assassinated, once again, a gun. So this is not a bash on, per se, political policy of any particular location's viewpoint, although there is that element to it. It's my question to you, Tony. Why are we so blooming obsessed as a human race with weapons and killing each other when you've got so many people allegedly saying, but it's for defense? You've got people saying we should be nice to each other. I mean, we are both follows. We both follow, frankly, a being that said, turn the other cheek. Yeah. And yet you have got a law that says in a country that is deeply religious, but you can carry a gun and shoot back.
Yeah.
So although I said we wouldn't get too political, you know.
That topic is difficult not to politicize for me.
Absolutely.
In the States, because we discussed, this is going to be a really controversial one, but we discussed Roe v.
Wade, yeah.
And one of the responses to that was, so it's illegal to kill children in the womb, but we can send them to school and teach them to hide under desks when gunmen come in to shoot them.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And the perfect thing for me on this is years and years and years ago, when I was up in the Northeast and I was quite small, 10 or 11, my dad was a bobby on the beat. and he went to a house, and there'd been a report of a domestic incident. Father v son. Father had come home and found son with next door's wife, and had gone a bit ballistic about it. So my dad knocked on the door of this guy's house, and he opened the door, and there was a double-barrel shotgun facing my dad, and there was a big hoo-ha. It was reported in the papers. My dad was asked to go on to some program in the northeast to discuss arming police. And the guy who was doing the interviewing was getting really ratty with my dad because he kept saying to my dad, "But wouldn't you have felt safer with a gun?" And my dad said, "No, because he would have just shot me, before I had the chance to shoot him. So no, I wouldn't have felt safer. He knew I didn't have a gun, so I could talk him down." But to answer your question in a roundabout way, I really don't understand it myself. I can't for the life of me think under what circumstances I would want one of those, a weapon of any kind, in my house.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, and I have got 2 knives in my house, but they're blunt. They've never been sharpened. One my granddad bought me, which was a little Bowie knife, which is about 6-8 inches long. And the other one, my dad got when he was in the army, and he was off on manoeuvres somewhere, and he sat on his downtime and carved pears jumping over hay bales into the sheath for me. So that's upstairs somewhere as well. But no,
I totally agree, and we've got some comments which I will bring up in a moment. But for me, it goes back to that animalistic nature that we humans have, and also that animalistic desire to defend one's territory, to be aggressive and fight off potential threats, and also to, basically be better and bigger than everyone else. That's a human nature thing. When you give nature weapons of destruction, you're asking for trouble. And Michael, I'm going to work in reverse, actually, because Michael says, but we also have kitchen knives that would take an arm off. Absolutely. Now, I'm going to tell a little story about my dad now, although even though he was in the police force, it's not related to the police. When he was in the Environment Agency, he did a chainsaw course. And they interviewed him before he got this license to use a chainsaw. And so they turned around and they said, "So do you feel comfortable using a chainsaw? Do you not think it's dangerous?" And he said, "Well, there's risk in everything." He said, "But yeah, it's a lethal weapon you're carrying." He said, "Yeah, I know it is." Now, my dad was famous for carrying a pen behind his ear. Everywhere he went, a black Bic biro always stuck there. And he leaned over and he said, "And I'll tell you what else." He says, "If I were to take this pen and shove it in your eyes, that'd be a lethal weapon too."
It's the intention, isn't it? It's the intention behind the action.
Exactly. And it reminds me actually of, I always get a popular culture quote in. It reminds me of one of the early episodes of The West Wing, actually, where they were talking about gun crime and using weapons for defense. And they said they always use a statistic that so many people had to defend themselves, and there's always a grandma somewhere who had to use a gun to defend themselves. And the response came back, "Yes, but she didn't have to use a modified AK-47.
No.
And this is the thing, it's obvious, really, when you look at the logic. Now, just going through the comments, let's remember the route of carrying guns in the USA. It is it's a flowing conversation. It is a response to the foundation to bear arms for the commoner to overturn the government. And at the moment, there's been a lot of that going on. We will talk about that later. And it's part of the Constitution where basically they were allowed to carry arms to get rid of us.
Yes.
The British are coming. The British are coming. Well, the British came and went and got told to sling the rook, and we did. And now we're in a special relationship and friends again. Whenever a British reporter mentions gun crime to any political ilked individual, I saw one skit the other day where she threw back, yes, but you don't have mass shootings, but you have mass knifings. Yes, we have a knife problem in this country, but you know what? If it comes to a choice between running from a knife and running from a gun, I know which I'd probably stand a chance of succeeding with.
Which then ties in with Michael's new comment about what a good quality muscle is hard to get hold of. I mean, that's what we were talking about in those days.
Yes, absolutely. And Alan chips in with the carrying of arms is a political choice. And that was the whole reason for it, as Michael's just said, as you've pointed out. It was a political reason. So as much as we try to avoid politics, it's not going to happen. Look, at the end of the day, we will try not to be political in the sense of representing any particular party, but I believe that as ministers, and we discussed this as well earlier, and I know you're on the same page, if we do not, as ministers, discuss things that will be of a partially political ilk, then we're not doing our jobs, because we have to be a voice of spiritual reason based on our teachings when these things happen. And when it comes to any use of any device that's going to cause the untimely death of an individual in a location where they are, not intending to do so, and certainly when they should be at the prime of their lives and thriving, or out enjoying themselves and having upliftment, then it is just wrong. And, why it just bugs me that we have to have weapons in the world. And Michael's just commented about the nuclear arms. There's a reason they called it MAD, mutually assured destruction.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about we were talking earlier, weren't we, about woke cancel culture. When everyone's on about woke cancel culture, I think the most ignorant thing to say is that trying to save lives is woke cancel culture. No, it's just common sense.
Yes.
And in actual fact, a lot of people get accused of being woke when all they're doing is wanting to share their view and common sense. And if people can't have a friendly, honest debate about their own feelings, no matter what the difference is. I mean, I know also from earlier on when we were talking, I know that there are things that we don't necessarily have an agreement on. But we discussed it in an adult, well-behaved manner, and we didn't even need to say we agreed to disagree, because in actual fact, we always find that we have more in common than we have apart. And I think that's the same principle with everyone.
I'm not going to go and jump in my car with my AK-47 and run down to the fence. No. But yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's about people who have limited ways of resolving issues and frustration. And because, like I said, we sort of found things before we came on that, well, all right, that's what you believe, this is what I believe. And it's, like you say, it didn't even turn into a discussion. It was just like, oh, okay, that's fine.
This is it.
Michael, where's my phone?
Yes, I have seen it. Bless him. But I mean, at the end of the day, if people want to quote See, from my view, the biggest problem is, once again, it goes back to power and authority and that animalistic desire to control. There are people who will quote chapter and verse about one thing 1 minute and then quote legal rights the next that completely counter to those chapter and verse. I mean, the perfect example is if you want to go to, for example, the Old Testament, thou shalt not kill. It's pretty early on and pretty famous. Then if you go back to the New Testament, you have heard the phrase, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say unto you, don't do it. Don't leave everyone blind and toothless. So it's in both ends, both the bookends. You know, taking a life is wrong. Being in a position where you have the potential to take a life happens enough in our lives as it is. Every time you get behind the wheel of a car, you are risking the potential that you might get distracted and end a life. You're not physically intending to do that, because that particular tool is a device designed to do something else. A gun?
I can't think of another reason for a gun.
No, because we don't need to go hunting, shooting and fishing anymore, because you can walk 2 miles down the road or even 10 yards down the road, go in a shop and say, could I have that packet, please? You know, yeah. So there is no other reason. Unless you want to, you know, talk about blood sports, which is a whole other can of worms that will get me really, really grumpy. So I suggest we probably don't. But, you know, at the end of the day, on a spiritual perspective, at least, on a religious perspective, on a spiritualist perspective, and even on a Christian perspective, the need to carry our gun for any reason shouldn't be there. We should do away with them completely. I understand the need to defend oneself, but you know, I'm pretty slick with a baseball bat. If it came down to it, if someone was at a gun was with a knife at me, yeah, I could probably knock it out the hands and then run like hell. Yeah. And that's what Friar Tuck would have done.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that sort of revolves to the reasonable force thing about you are allowed to defend your home with reasonable force, you know. And yeah, Chrissy, I couldn't agree more, darling.
Absolute. Out of the mouths of babes. Hello, darling. Hope you're all right, by the way. If there isn't any guns, you wouldn't need to defend yourself with one.
There you are, Michael. That's the $1 million question, isn't it? What counts as reasonable?
What counts as reasonable?
Yeah. And that's the thing for me. If somebody broke into my house, I would want to defend myself and my property. But
yes,
there's nothing in my head that would make me think, I'll just reach under the bed, grab my revolver and put a bullet in the red. It wouldn't happen.
To me, that would not be reasonable force either.
No, it would be, let's grab some heavy from a shoe, one of Michael's work shoes with the steel toe caps, chuck it at them, you know. But there we are.
Absolutely. And thank you for chipping in, and thank you for the compliment, Chrissy. And, you know, Reverend Alan, as ever, trying to save the universe, speaking absolute common sense, get rid of the planes, boats and arms. The result would be world peace.
Yeah.
And
we should just all be able to rub along together and get on with it, you know.
Exactly. I mean, if we're looking for a good tie-in to our next topic, that is the whole point of the modern world when it comes to politics and to a democracy. It's about coming together, discussing things in a sensible way, behaving as adults, finding out what's the best for everyone, and moving forward with it, because that is what democracy is.
It is. There you go.
However,
yeah,
So, as far as we're concerned, you know, guns, bad. People needing them, unnecessary. The world should. Look, let's be honest. The world seems to think that it's so big and bad and mature these days. We should all be able to deal with it in a relatively reasonably short, on a comparative scale, short space of time, and actually just, rather than worrying about individual views, worry about the individual liberty of a right to live in peace and get rid of the damn things and make a start now, because the longer it gets held off, the worse it's going to get. We were talking about, just before, and to close the subject, we were talking about the number of mass shootings in America earlier and how it was 309, and I can confirm that it is 309 this year, of which there have only been 174 days in it. Speaks volumes, really. Speaks volumes.
And that's just in the States.
Yeah, and that's just in the States, and there is so much more. And of course, we send our thoughts to everyone who has been affected by any of these shootings, and we also send our thoughts to the friends and family and the people represented by Shinzo Abe, who was all about democracy in a country basically that for the last 50 odd years has only had a defence force, because it's in its constitution that it's not allowed to have an attacking army, and they're still here. So democracy is the provision of what is best for the majority. Yes, I think that was kind of, I was being sarcastic when I was saying what I was saying, Michael, because as we all know from the news, that hasn't exactly been what's happening. And not just in this country, to be fair. I mean, this country was still very British in the sense of let's all have a nice cup of tea and swear at each other and sort it out. Whereas if you look in, say, for Sri Lanka, everyone took over the presidential palace, went for a swim, and then burnt it down. You know, I'm glad that we didn't get to that level when it comes to Chequers, because it's a beautiful building and a nice piece of architecture. But we have obviously, in the last 7 days, I mean, it all kicked off pretty much after we stopped our video.
Yes.
So when it comes to our political leaders, Reverend Tony, should we expect them to be perfect? Should we expect them to not make witty quips regarding nicknames describing their behaviors and then put them in power? Should we make victims of abuse feel like they are the problem? And should we tolerate our leaders lying to us left, right, and centre?
Short answer, no.
But we have got another 20 minutes, so we're going to need to fill it out a little bit more than that.
No, in a nutshell, because I think we should hold them to a higher benchmark than that. And I think that we should expect honesty. Like I was saying to you earlier, when I had staff, it was always, if you come and tell me and we can sort about it. We can sort it out, unpick it all and get to the bottom of it. And I think the incidents we're talking about weren't we're beyond before the Chris Pincher and it's been unraveling for a long time. It's been unraveling for a long time, hasn't it? Really. Go back to Partygate, then Beergate with Keith Starmer, and which was another one that sort of was like, oh well, let's what can we do to we're all as bad as each other. That's what it is. We're all as bad as each other, and
However, for legal reasons, we do have to mention, of course, that today I read that Keir Starmer has been no further action for Beergate.
Which isn't number one. That it's a bad week, really, for number 10, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, you know, as I said last week, there are certain points when I will be devil's advocate. So devil's advocate question, but why, as they are just normal, run-of-the-mill, at the end of the day, eating, sleeping, weeing, pooing human beings, why do we have a right to hold them to a higher standard?
In much the same respect that I understand that I am judged differently when I'm wearing this, because it's a position of responsibility that you undertake. Yes, we are all human. Yes, we all do things. But because I chose to undertake this way of life, I agreed that to my higher power, okay, I'll do this, and I will do my best. I will do my best to hold myself to that higher principle. I would not judge a member of a congregation that came to me and said, I've done this and I've done this and I've done this, and you know, I think, you know, I want to repent for it, and I wouldn't be all holier than thou if I was doing the same thing. But by the same token, if we were having discussions about a colleague and it was mooted, you know, you rang me up and said, oh, I've got a bit of a problem here. Somebody suggested that Freddie down there is doing something he shouldn't be doing. Fine. You know what he's like. Let's laugh it off. No. And I wouldn't say to the people who came to us to talk about Freddie down the road, well, what were you doing? Oh, are you gay? Oh, asking for it then, weren't you?
That's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, I will be devil's advocate to ask the question, but then I will let my thoughts on it be shared as no. And to be honest with you, I could be really, really grumpy right now and say, you know, I'm going to come on here and I'm going to put a pullover on, and or what? Not a pullover. What's the one without the sleeves?
Tank top
Yeah, I'm going to pull on a tank top jumper and go down to number 10 and offer Boris one, because in the papers once he wrote that gay people are just tank top wearing, you know, whatevers, and you know, and I'm not going to finish that sentence. Yeah. But this is my point, and this is my point. The signs have always been there. Yes, there is no denying that the current government has had a lot to deal with. Yes, there has been unprecedented situations that have arisen in this world over the last 2 or 3 years. There's no denying that. And some of it's been handled well, some of it hasn't. But from my view, if you are going to put someone in a position of authority, the word is responsible. And that comes with a certain level of responsibility. Personal responsibility for behaviours, responsibility for the people that you're looking after, and taking responsibility and ownership for the things you've done wrong. What I have always seen, because I've always watched for years and years and years, I've always watched Prime Minister's Question Time, all the programmes and everything. And the whole reason that this exists is because I watched the BBC's newspaper programme at 10:30 and 11:30. So I've always been interested and followed because it affects me as a citizen of this great nation of ours. What I've always seen and always noticed, that it's always been the same problem. it does seem a lot bigger and more prevalent now because we've got this 24-hour news cycle. It was revealed on social media by sources, by a member of the press, that the Prime Minister was going to step down. So we all knew why the stand was going out there. We all knew what he was going to say when he came out to say it, because it had already been released. And in this climate in which we live politically and journalistically, you know, it seems like it's something new when really it isn't. I mean, we talk about the comments that politicians have made about same-sex relationships with Boris and the pullovers. But if you go back to the days of Edwina Currie standing up and speaking proud about doing away with our prejudices, and then someone turns over from the back of the hall and says, I do not want members to be deceived, we're talking about, and then I'm not going to repeat that either. And that is on record in the Houses of Parliament. So I don't need to. But the point is, it's always been there. We've always had this saying, politicians never tell the truth. Politicians always twist the truth. Politicians will never give you a straight answer to a question. But I think, honestly, when you try and argue that a case has been upheld, that's not implying guilt, and you argue the difference between upheld and guilt for 5 minutes, I think you're on a slippery slope to being probably higher up the chain of failings.
What galled people more was, which has been another pattern over the past few months. We trot out a line, the line slightly changes, we trot that out for another few days, that slightly changes, and then we get to the truth.
Yeah.
And I think that was the problem that a lot of MPs had. We've been trotted out to say, no, he knew nothing about this MP, the chief whip, as was. No, he knew nothing about that. What actually he did, but no specific. Well, yeah, he did know about a specific one, but it wasn't guilt. It was, like you say, upheld. And I think they just thought, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. I'm off. You know?
Yeah.
Which you would be. I mean.
Yeah. And the conversation's getting pretty hot between Michael and himself down in the comments there. You know, but on the spiritual side of it, as spiritualists, we believe in love and truth and light. And truth being, and on my Thursday service, I even paralleled that it's all three that matters.
Yeah.
So love matters, truth matters, and light matters.
Yeah.
In this situation, I think truth and light in this instance being shining a light on the things that we need to know about. And, you know, I said a little while ago that, you know, the news cycles and the social media and the activity that we all have has made it look worse and higher and more up there. But the point is, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing.
No.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. It's good that we have more information to us, because at the end of the day, we appoint these people to run our lives. We are the ultimate bosses of this country, because every 4 years, allegedly, we elect a new government and new prime minister. However, I can't remember the last time an actual prime minister carried to full term. I think it was probably Cameron, and he only got one full term.
But do you also think that we've had quite a shift in the past 2 years as well? Because, hang on, Michael's just making a noise behind the camera there. we've had those 2 years where, like you said, it was good for the planet because we were all locked down and we couldn't travel very far, and then we were slowly reintroduced so the planet could recover a little bit. But we were all locked down, and we've all heard it. If you've heard the news, we couldn't go and visit loved ones. We couldn't go and attend funerals. Look at your dad's funeral. We watched that online.
Yeah.
It was tragic. You couldn't go and hug your mum.
No.
And so when things started to leak, the indignation felt by the country was more. And we thought we were all going through it together.
Yes.
And to find out certain people's moral compass wasn't quite pointing where we thought it was, suddenly becomes this huge problem. So I think there were two things going on. Like you said, we've got now more access to immediate news than we've ever had. People are more tech savvy, so emails get accidentally forwarded on to people who can leak them. Release them.
Release them, yes.
And so there's the combination of the two things there, which they've fallen foul of this week, and it's suddenly become, we're not standing for it anymore.
Absolutely. And I can see you having a read, and half the problem, they lied and cannot be honest, and then wonder why they are not trusted. You know, I agree. And as Michael said just before that, and I'm not referring John Major's eggs, we don't get to the truth. Do we ever get the full story, even though we are more tech savvy, even though we have got the endless news cycle and social media? Do we actually get the full truth, and how can we know? And here's a question for the future. Bearing in mind that it is going to be a very limited number of people who will elect the next Prime Minister for what I would refer to as probably an interim period before the next general election, even though it's 2 years off. We've seen a pattern happen like this before. Yeah. My question is, yes, we're going to be getting a new Prime Minister. What difference is there going to be?
I think that has to come down to the people who are chucking their hats into the ring right now. But for me, it's we talked about this earlier as well, didn't we? About there are points in life where you sometimes have to make the best worst choice, and then there are times in life when you just have to make the worst choice, and I think that's basically where we are at the moment.
Yeah.
We hope and pray that the best worst choice is picked, and then see where we go from there. Because from a spiritual perspective, I think it's about looking at people and thinking, these people who are going to be putting their votes in over the next few days and weeks, let's just see what they pick out of the people who are putting their names forward. So far, but you never know. You never know. Yeah. There must be a completely random one that, you know. Yeah.
And the thing for me, Tony, is, you know, at the end of the day, on a spiritual level, whenever there is a change and a new day, there's an opportunity to make changes. Yes, there will always inevitably be the comment, they're all liars, get them all out. Well, who are you going to replace them with? Because these were originally people who were just like, well, some of them certainly not just like us, but you know what I mean. These people weren't always born to lead unless they thought they were going to be world king. So what do we do? Because if we get rid of them all, who are we going to replace them with? And at the end of the day, it was in the end, and this is devil's advocate view, not necessarily my own view, it was in the end the Conservative Party who dealt with the lies and the scandals publicly by there being 59, I think it was 59 resignations in order for the message to be got that the party weren't happy. So what can we do? And Reverend Allen has nothing will change until party politics are binned. MPs should serve the people, not the party. My question, I agree with you. And I'm not going to bring that one up, Michael, until you correct your spelling.
Yeah, please don't.
Whether it was deliberate or not. See, I don't bring up. I check. I'm not like certain TV programs that accidentally bring the wrong ones up. Yeah. So my question, back on that, Alan, I don't disagree, but what would change if it wasn't party politics, and what system we have?
The thing is, though, Nick, I was just going to bring this point in, actually. These people were elected by the people, and their job in Parliament is to represent their constituency. So they should be doing that already.
Yes. I have to say, there we go. I will bring that one up now. Maybe a general election too. The other has just resigned. For me, I think that it goes back to pretty much everything that we've discussed.
It does.
People. It's the animalistic ownership. I want me, power, that the physical side of us has. And if we were to all just learn to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves, rise above the animalistic instincts that we have, then maybe, just maybe, it would be better. I think the point about party politics, I don't know whether there were party affiliations in the Greek and the Greek and Roman senates. I don't know for sure whether there were or not. Maybe that's why, if there wasn't, maybe that's why democracy got a good kickstart. I think that when people do come together in packs, in groups, there is always a risk of, shall we say, ill behavior and attitude. That's circular reasoning, Michael. And I know you're trying to wind me up, but it ain't going to happen because I'm in a good mood. But nice try, though. Nice try. A month ago, I might have reacted badly to that one. The whole animalistic side of us, when we come together in packs, when we come together in groups, there's always a risk, be it religion, be it politics, be it anything. And I think from a spiritual perspective, we need to just stop, rewind, and try again, as they used to say in Budgeon's training, and remember what our issues are and what our problems are, and work on them before we start telling other people how to live their lives.
Yes.
And, so therefore, I think absolutely right, even though I was playing devil's advocate earlier, we should hold people to a higher account if they're responsible for our lives.
And I mean, you did say last week after this spiritual live that we did, that bit about David coming on. He had a really good. They both actually, Michael and David, the twins, had a really good input when we were talking about the Bible, and they said, "Oh, we've been doing that in school," and and they said, I'll paraphrase, but how many nice stories do you need to say to people, just stop being a Richard to each other? And I think it's the same thing with, if you bring it back to the politicians and things, it's that if people just look out for each other and live by their key principles and the spiritual principles, like we say, bringing it back to the brotherhood of mankind, humankind, and personal responsibility, you know, it's. I mean, I'm not saying I could do a better job, but Nick, if you go for Prime Minister, I'll go for Deputy.
Could you imagine it? I've actually got Uncle Tom's red case, but it's a bit small to be a politician's case. But no, I made my choice of ministry, and my ministry is religious, not political. I couldn't do it. I couldn't put up with it, and you know, we have to look that even though we do have to hold these people to a higher account, we do have to look at the human side too. One politician was criticised for reacting to a crowd, but then it transpired she'd had several death threats. So you are putting yourself in the firing line when you do go for that. But then when you get in a group of people, as we said, it's pack mentality. I don't know the answers on the political side, but I do know that if we all just behaved as responsible, mature people with kindness and love and compassion, a lot of the problems, not all of them, but a lot of the problems could be solved. We have one final piece of advice for everyone at home. In this weather, we should learn to relax, enjoy ourselves, and be happy. And as I'm not allowed to share anything that's overly copyrighted, I'm limited to YouTube and social medias like TikTok, which is why the other one was there. But if you want a smile before you go, if you want the usual Little Port Independent Spiritualists Alliance upliftment, here's a bit of advice from a very good friend of mine about how to enjoy yourself. And in actual fact, we've spoken much tonight about animalistic in nature. Let's try and follow this particular nature. Smile, grab the balloon, look sweet and cute, and enjoy yourself. Especially with a little bit of jazzy music as well. Tony, as ever, thank you so much, friends. It's Reverend Tony. Thank you for joining us this week, although it's us and other people will be joining us eventually when I can get that sorted. Been dealing with HMRC this week. Enough about that. Thank you to everyone who has been watching at home. I hope it was at least informative on a spiritual side of what we've been going through as a nation and as a world this last week. Whatever happens to you all, thank you for joining us. Be careful, look after one another, keep safe, and keep in the shade because the sun ain't going anywhere for a little while yet. No. Until next week when we will be back, please get it. All right, I'll let you have that one. If I had anything to get offshore, I would, Reverend. Naughty boy. Until next week, friends, thank you for joining us. Do keep safe. And please, if there is a news article or a subject that comes up during the week that you'd like us to discuss from a spiritual aspect, send it along so that we can avoid getting stuck in the news cycle of politics. So thank you, Tony. God bless.
Thank you and God bless. God bless you all.
Good night and good afternoon. And here's the music.